Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Shirkers and workers. Please welcome to the stage the director of Shirkers, Sandi Tan.
Hi. Thanks for staying. Actually, I have a question for you before we start. Like, in the program, I was so intrigued by this. Why, and I always do this to you, I always ask you some embarrassing questions. We've done this before. Why do you describe this as a slasher flick? I mean, it was described in the program as the original Shirkers was a slasher slasher flick,
and I was like, I didn't write that copy.
Okay,
And
it was misleading. It was like
to
enticing
be a road
for young
movie.
people, but I just hate to mislead and disappoint many people that it wasn't a slasher flick.
We got a good
anyway.
audience based on that that synopsis.
Yeah, it was not. Anyway, so I'm gonna invite some special guests. Jasmine is here with us from Singapore. I hope we have a mic for her. Do we have a mic? And we have a mic for her, I hope. And then I would like to surprise Jasmine, actually. You know the 14-year-old production assistant that we had working in Shirkers back then? He's not 14 anymore. Alex Mallinson, please. He lives in London now, and he works in CGI, and he's here, so he showed up. And he's got no hair. So yeah, that's yeah. Can you hold this?
So
I usually
move to the center of the stage.
No, I usually have lots of people standing between me and Jasmine because that's the way we are.
I can go there.
Yeah, please do that. But just not distract us. It's good.
Come join us over here, guys.
No, I mean, if you need
so we have,
your therapy paid for, blame her.
we've got time for a 15-minute Q&A, and I'd love to get audience questions too, so I'm not going to take the limelight too much asking questions. Please do raise your hands if you have a question. After the Q&A, we will go pretty much straight into a performance by Weish and Din of GIF, who made part of the soundtrack to this film. So get excited for that.
The voice of Shirkers.
Yeah. So firstly, I wanted to ask you, it's obviously 20 years since the first film was produced. Why did you start to look backward at this point? Why did you start to think about going on this journey? And a question for you, Jasmine, also, were you afraid when Sandi mentioned
Well, first things
you can go
first.
first, yeah.
Long answer, but I'm going to try to be really brief. I had no choice. This thing found me, and I had to do it. The boxes arrived, after I was talking. Well, on September 11th, 2011, a significant anniversary for a lot of Americans, I received this email from this person in the past, which is the widow, the ex-wife widow of George, and she began. She told me that, she had found all these boxes filled with 70 cans, and there was 700 minutes of film, and they were all pristine, and was I interested in having them back? And by then, I was actually grown up in LA. I was a novelist and, buried this past, and I just was a different person. I just didn't want to deal with any of this. And it was really, really difficult when the boxes started arriving at my house, and there was 7 of them, and I stacked them up to take as little room as possible in my house. So I would stack them up, the first box came, and then the second box came, and then finally it was maybe 6 months before all 7 came, and they were all stacked up like a vertical coffin, and they resembled the sarcophagus in my living room, and just standing there haunting me for 3 years, because I just couldn't open them up. I mean, it was like a Pandora's box, I guess. I just didn't want to deal with what lay in there, and what I thought lay in there was just teenage me giving this horrible performance, which I remember doing, a teenage zombie me, and I just didn't want to have to deal with that. It was complete vanity at that point. And then what happened was a family member died, and I got a little bit of money, and I could actually finally digitize the film, because it costs so much money to digitize film. As you know, 16 millimeter takes forever a lot of money to do. So I finally
a coffin full of
the coffin full of 700 minutes full of them, and so I took them to this place in Burbank, California. Finding a place that could actually, and this is really long answer. I know I'm trying to be brief. It's a really hard thing to do, to find people who knew what to do with color, who knew what to do with 16. And so I took a lot of research, and then I found a place that does a lot of Criterion discs, and I found that in fact the place that did the Grand Budapest Hotel on Criterion and Douglas Sirk movies, and I thought, okay, these people know about color. So I took it to them, and then they opened up the cans, and they found that each of the reels was wrapped in black plastic, because of course George was a crazy person, and every little reel was pristine. And that's how it was kept pristine. And they thought I was punking them, the people at the post house, because they thought everything looked perfect. There's no way. This was shot 23 years ago, and I had to be punking them, but I wasn't. And then we watched the footage, and the guy.
Did you watch it alone?
I watched it with the colorist, the guy who did the Douglas Sirk DV coloring, and his jaw dropped, and he was like, "Wow, wow." And the whole time I was like, instead of wow, I was like, whew, I wasn't insane. I did not imagine this. This actually happened, and now I have proof. And this person who has absolutely nothing to do with the film was actually impressed with this and didn't think I was particularly awful. Of course, there was no sound, but he wasn't. I just knew that something had to be done with this, because a complete stranger who has no history with this thing thought this was amazing, and the story was kind of amazing. And I thought, okay, and also, I thought I should get in touch with my friends again. I hadn't actually talked to Sophie or really Jasmine in a long time, and this was an elaborate ruse, after 20-some years, to kind of get in touch with them again, because I'm such a horrible friend that I need the intermediary, this kind of phony excuse to just say hi to these people again. So I did, and then the movie was kind of like my excuse for saying hi.
Hi, Sandy.
You see, this is why I don't engage.
Welcome to the group therapy session.
Jasmine, how did you feel when she said hi?
There is such a thing as email. I mean, although we've been living in different countries for a while, of course
You stayed in touch.
Yeah. And seeing
but like Sophie, me and her, we hadn't been in the same room in 20 years. At the Sundance premiere was
it
like
was not
the
a court
first
order,
time.
it was just because we were working in different places.
I'll shut up now. Okay. No, but you questioned her, and I wanted to.
Yeah, I guess were you, obviously the first time round making a film was quite a journey. What did you think when Sandi proposed another film?
No, I think the first time we weren't daunted. We were stupid enough, young, dumb, and full of blank, and we didn't think it was, we didn't think it was impossible. It was just all that nonsense we had been doing in school prior to that, all those projects, and I don't know. I mean, I think if anything at all, if the film did come to fruition, it's kind of like what Philip says there. It would have probably goaded a lot of other people to say, yeah, we can do better than that. And I think it would have been a very different kind of film scene in Singapore then, yeah. But it was.
I'm actually slightly more negative than that, because if it had been put together, I think it might have been, the world was not ready for us. Suddenly, I think our families would have laughed at us and yelled at us for wasting our time. All our enemies at school would have just laughed at us for making a stupid movie and having, me giving such a terrible performance. I think we would have been laughed out of town by everybody who hated us, and we would all be lawyers and accountants now.
But you'd be rediscovered and be cult right now, I think.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I tell myself that lie to, whatever.
I wanted to ask about, George. Firstly, do you think the sound does exist somewhere? The sound obviously wasn't discovered. Do you think it was it ever recorded in the first instance, and does it exist out there somewhere? Is there a possibility of Shirkers ever coming together from that original material? But secondly, I wanted to ask about his motivation, whether it was jealousy, whether it was he wasn't so into where the film was going in terms of direction, or whether he felt your screenplay and your role within the film, your creative role, was overtaking his position.
You answered that question. I don't know. I really don't know. I cannot speak for somebody who isn't there. In fact, this entire film was I guess it's kind of my dialogue with a person who's no longer there across some kind of strange chasm, an impossible dialogue with an impossible friend, a very, very strange friend. I consider him a friend still, I guess. I really don't know his motivations. I think he was, now that I'm his age, when he was like, when we made Shirkers, I'm much more sympathetic to somebody who's aging but does not feel very old. And so he was hanging out with teenage girls, and he felt like a teenage girl. I always thought he was like a teenage girl, and filled with the same kind of anxieties and jealousies and all those kinds of feelings. And so I'm sure he was given to the same kind of pettiness. But the thing about George, and I find fascinating still, is that he was a great storyteller, and I feel like he was writing the novel of his life in living it. And in his way of being creative was taking things away from others, being this black hole that sucked everybody's time and talent and dreams away. And that was his form of creation, which I find fascinating. I don't condone it, but I find fascinating. He kind of opened my, eyes to a certain kind of darkness, and I'm still kind of fascinated by that. I don't hate him. I mean, I did for a while, but anyway, that's my answer. I can only guess at his motivations. I think he was obviously overwhelmed, but I think part of it was his way of making us remember him forever. And in a way, he, like making this film, I was so conflicted about it because it's like, like playing to his hand. Like he obviously loves he loved, I shouldn't say loves, because I talk about him in the present tense, which is not very healthy. He obviously wanted to be talked about, and this is talking about him, which, but I try to reclaim it for us. But the first part of the question, which was...
About the sound, whether you think it's out there.
Can we ask the audience, how many of you actually believe the sound might be out there somewhere, based on your experience?
Survey.
Based on no, I really, the thing is, like the widow had searched high and low and asked all their friends, and I think because he had done this part of his behavior, he's done this where he listen, no, you don't even know this. You didn't make this film. I talked to all these people involved. You see, this is okay. Anyway, so like he's done this to Steve. He's done this to other people. He's kind of taken the sound and thrown it away. And I feel like making things disappear, and maybe, there's a part of me that thinks that he might have buried it somewhere in a third place, because even collecting these 70 reels, they were not all in the same place, and they had to be reassembled. It was like a puzzle piece he left us, or me, that I had to assemble together, and there's a possibility that the sound is somewhere. It was definitely recorded because the sound guy is and was sane and truthful, and it was done. So it did exist at that point. But I think, even if he had kept it in a mystery place in his house in New Orleans, because of Katrina, everything in his old house was destroyed. So it would have been destroyed anyway. And it's only because of his insanity, taking all these boxes of things everywhere around the world with him, that when he moved to Houston, that Katrina did not damage Shirkers. Otherwise, Shirkers would have been gone. But it was because he was so insane that he moved these boxes with him everywhere. He went like Australia, Houston, Seattle, that it was saved. It was saved by his madness.
I'd like to open it up to the audience at this point. We have a roaming microphone, if you can just wait for that. There's a gentleman on the left here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for showing the film and for coming to talk to us about it today. And there's another film after this they call her Cleopatra Wong.
Yes.
You've shown a lot in the film, and they say in the program that you were largely influenced by it. But I wonder what parts of it has influenced you, and how did it influence you?
Okay, yeah, the influence is a very strange word. It was influential to me because she was my stepmother. Cleopatra Wong. She was my stepmom for 6 months when I was a kid, and before my father tried to kill her. That's another different story. Can
you tell that story?
But another story. Too long for here, and too public. So she was a great storyteller too when I was a kid, and I didn't know that she had made this because I was too young to have seen Cleopatra Wong, but she was influential in that way, that was her first film that she was acting in when she was 19. And there was strange parallels where she, you know, plays this kind of, you know, larger than life hero. And she was like the first, I don't know, and I know that Quentin Tarantino was obsessed with her and had a portrait of her as Cleopatra Wong hanging in his kitchen for a long time. And apparently she's like one of the inspirations for Kill Bill's main character. So maybe she's more of an inspiration for him than for me, but for me it was the fact that she existed and that she was part of this film that exists. And part of my, I guess in my early 20s, one of my goals, one of the things I did was to find the lost Cleopatra Wong, because it was a kind of a missing film that nobody remembered, and I found a print of it, and I, you know, had held some kind of screening in Singapore and got it back into the public again, so, and celebrated her, and actually, that was my excuse for getting back in touch with my ex-stepmom, who, you know, was estranged from me, was to, again, revive a film so I could get in touch with her, and she's really kind of a friend again, except, yeah, she's a friend again.
They called her Cleopatra Wong. Will be in showroom 1 or 2 after this.
Yeah, and
this
it's
event.
not a good film. So please go and drink
is a
a
fun
lot
film.
and smoke a lot of whatever you want before you go see it,
The bar is
because it's
still
much
open.
more enjoyable. And you've seen it, have you?
Yes.
It's horrible, isn't it?
It's good for this time of night, really.
Yeah,
Definitely.
because Sophie, who's a film scholar, was supposed to be here, but she's not here because of an illness. But she is actually a film scholar who is currently writing about Cleopatra Wong. She was supposed to be here defending it while I attacked it,
Okay.
so but she's not here. So
Are there any more audience questions out there? There's a lady at the back there. It's a long way for the microphone to travel.
Hello. So obviously we wouldn't have Shirkers, the documentary, if Shirkers, the 1992 features film, had existed. Which film would you choose?
this one, of course. I think it's the better story anyway. It is like I feel like it's the remake of a film that was never made. You know, it's kind of like again, it's kind of like a road movie, which the original was, but this is the bigger version that happens around the world. And me as a grown-up, I'm picking off more interesting people along the way and expanding the family of Shirkers. It's still an impossible road movie, but I think it's probably written with, I don't know, I think it's a better film.
I think we have another question. The lady just here in the front. The mic's on its way.
Hi, so yeah, I saw it at Sundance and I was just blown out of my head. And then it's better seeing it the second time.
It is? Oh my
Yeah,
God, I was
because
so afraid.
you
that
were a
could-
kid genius.
Sheffield makes
and
everything
you
better.
wouldn't take that at Sundance when people said this is a work of genius. And that's very important what you said about Cleopatra now, because that is very, all the time when I see you, you seem so confident to camera as a young girl. As a kid, you knew how to make a film. And so you had to have an implant from parents who were filmmakers. Was your dad also?
No, I mean, she wasn't really a filmmaker then. She was an actress who was hugely exploited by this horrible filmmaker who made Cleopatra Wong when she was 19. I mean, that's a whole
Still,
other
that
story.
was in your household.
Yeah,
You grew up with that.
I didn't actually grow up with them because my parents abandoned me, so I was raised by my grandparents. But she existed there, and she's now a filmmaker, though she, you know, crazily enough, inspired by everything, I guess. She sold her house, and she's just directed. She's now a director, a writer-director, and she's just finished her second feature film. So good for her at like 60-something, and good for her. My father's not a filmmaker at all. He's just he's a writer of really horrible short stories that he wanted me to help him publish, and I said no.
Okay, so my question is to Jasmine. Jasmine, tell us about your filmmaking thing, because the first time I was like rooting for you, like, why doesn't she listen to, you know, this guy who's cheating them? Tell us about your career now and what you do.
Now,
Yeah.
I'm still stealing old people out of old folks' homes and actually I am making some short films with old folks about death and dying right now. It's been an ongoing project we've been doing with theater, animation, verbatim things, and we install it in different neighborhoods. So yeah.
So when are you guys going to make the sequel?
to Shirkers?
Yeah, Shirkers too.
Well, I mean, I've said it before in Sundance that maybe it's a blessing that the sound wasn't there. I still believe it's out there somewhere because, I mean, as you've seen, George was a hoarder. Sandy is a hoarder, as you see.
So are
from all
you.
that.
Oh my
Well,
God.
yeah, so am I. So
Okay.
I really don't. And the way he kept the film, of course, you keep it in black wrap, and because it came from the undeveloped cans. That's what he was doing. He was very meticulous. So I believe the sound is somewhere out there if it's not been destroyed, because he moved continents and so many cities, right, all the time. And it's just a miracle that most of it survived. But yeah, I think if anything at all, I think we can say that it would have been maybe fun if we actually put out some of the footage. We were saying that what if we crowdsourced and we had people just do like a "What's up, Tiger Lily," and you supply your own dialogue and put life back into that mute footage. That would be a fun thing to do.
All three of you could get a copy, and you can each make your own film.
All of you get a copy. Let's put it on the internet.
No. Anyway, different approaches. Can I
I
quickly?
have a question for Alex. What the
I
hell
know,
was
I
your
was-
dad thinking? Alex's dad was our history teacher when we were doing our A-levels in junior college.
And
I
this
don't
is
know
how
why
we
he thought it was
found him.
appropriate. Because there should be like child custody.
Yeah, you can-
I was
custody
no, actually,
services.
I was going to ask him like how like you seeing this for the first time, and I told him about all this. I sent him a bunch of press clippings because we got written about, and then he says, I'm dropping everything and I'm going to Sheffield from London. So
Yeah, that was a really strange experience because this is the first time I've seen it, and just catapulted back 23 years to that. And it was such a formative
25
experience. But I feel like I escaped unscathed, frankly, after seeing that and comparing it to you guys' experience. And I was 14 and feckless, so I walked away from the film going, that was fun. And kind of,
but you collapsed, and your dad was yelling at us for exploiting you because
I collapsed.
I think it was one day that you collapsed and.
You see, because I still remember that one day where George was like, you'd never shoot a road dry, so wet this road. And you were this wide shot of this huge junction, and I was there with a kind of washing up bowl and going, and it's 30 degrees, 32 degrees, and the sun was blazing, and really? This is filmmaking. Okay.
And you're still in it too.
Yeah, I know, I still did it. Yeah.
I think we've got time for one more audience question before the performance. There's a gentleman just here.
Hi. Obviously, it seems very a homage to Singapore, and as you said, you kind of like to get back in touch with past relationships through making films. How important is the reaction in Singapore to this film, to you?
It hasn't shown there yet,
Yeah.
and it will at some point. And that's what we're all working on. I think people will be really fascinated. I think so far, younger people are fascinated to see what it looked like back then. But more than that, I think it's the emotional thing of just remembering, for the people who were old enough to remember, what it was like to kind of, feel fearless and just go out and do stuff and just be, just like make your own fun. Kind of thing. And for the young people now, because everything is so regimented, everything is so, you can get everything in Singapore. It's such an expensive place to live. It's so, people are so averse to taking risks right now because everything is, everything's expensive and nobody's going to give you film and equipment for free anymore. And I just would like to have everyone actually, not just in Singapore, but remember what it was like, or just go out and do stuff because, we had nothing and we just did it. So I don't know, that was the response, but we'll see what they think. I hope they like it. I think they will.
Thank you.
Please put your hands together for Sandy and the team.
Thanks for staying. And don't leave because we're going to have the live, the voice that you heard singing through the film. Well, Weish is here from Singapore. And she's a live looper that I found on the internet and pulled into the Shirkers family. So she's going to do a bunch of songs here to some extra footage, back projection of extra Shirkers stuff that I cut together for this purpose. And she's a school teacher who left her job to do this. So, and she's really talented. So I just can't wait to share her with you. This is her first UK date. And she's here with Din. She's got a duo as well called GIF. And so 2 of the songs are going to be her solo, and 2 of them are going to be with him as well. And I think that's just amazing. So cool. Thanks for staying.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. Just an amazing promo. Another big round of applause for the whole Shirkers team, please. Just an American movie. It's so joyful and painful at the same time. And on second watch, it just occurs to me that what George did to the film is kind of what S does to the people in the original Shirkers, right? She finds friends that she likes and trusts enough to kill and then bring to the afterlife. And maybe George just loved Shirkers so much he killed it so it could live in afterlife in 2018. It's pretty insane metafiction thing. Really exhilarating. My name's Weish, and I'm very jet-lagged because it's been a 35-hour journey from sunny Singapore, where it's also 35 degrees Celsius. And I'm really happy to be here. I'm gonna start with a song called Tick Tick, which you heard parts of in the film, and I hope you like it. I lie awake, waiting for the Sandman to come and light the bed. I lie awake, waiting for these sleepy visions of a face. So there I wait and 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 I sit in that same old cafe, posing with a cigarette and hoping someone would call my name. I peer over pages or passers by. Am I waiting for you or someone new to mend my broken heart? Broken heart. All I ever asked of you was this: hold me till the sun overthrows the night and burns us all to dust. All to dust. Oh, well, I see all I have is this bag of words, and even those I never dare to tell. So we've been an electronic duo in Singapore for about 5 years. We're both teaching English literature in government schools and under some crazy bureaucracy and very dystopian politics. And now we are free, perhaps partly inspired by Shirkers, to try and do things that make no sense. So we're musicians now. So this is a Doctor song, the very first one we ever wrote together as stupid kids, and this one's called Diatribe. I'm tired of the voices call as I walk down the street. They howl and they crawl, but I'm numb from my head to my feet. I call to my memory with a vague hope that she made a mistake. Fun fact, I used to work at the zoo training like monkeys and stuff. Then I became a teacher, like different kinds of monkeys. Anyway, yeah. It's not a very humane thing to do, which I learned at 18 years old at a zoo, but we try. Okay. This is another song of my own with just live loops. It takes a bit of time to build. Please bear with me. And this one is called In My Sleep, from which some of the vocal loops were used for the film. It's too hard for words to go into And how you hide, how you jive in the corners of my head. And how I try to fight the sounds of all the things you said. In my eyes, there's a movie screen. Every night, I go all the places that we've been. Forget that it's supposed to be awkward, throw me in the air like you used to. Turn the departure gates to diamond ceilings to an endless sky of what if I still see you? What if I still see you in my? Why do I still see you? Why do I still see you in my? Why do I still see you? Why do I still see you? Why do I still see you? Why do I still see you in my sleep? In my sleep. In my We're down to our last song. Thanks for having us, Luke and Nia and Catherine. Thank you so much for having us, Sandy and Jasmine. Everybody, it's been amazing. Please shout about the film wherever and whenever you can, because I love it so much, and I love that it's come from Singapore. Well, partly. This is a song. This last song is one that Sandy has requested. Hopefully you use it in your next film, yeah? This one's called Song 6 by Doc Chef. Day in, day out, and it's always So there it was, our cold, precious love. We'll blow at the embers, we'll turn it for every last spark. But it's killing me inside, I can't see why it has to be this hard. This hard. But we've fallen too deep to crawl out alive. So with a laugh and a full heart, my love, meet me on the other side. And I've come too far down to do it alone. So I hope you're not too battered down, babe, to have hope. But we've fallen too deep to cry out alive. So with a laugh and a full heart, my love, meet me on the other side. And I've come too far down to do it alone. So I hope you're not too battered down, babe, to have hope. Thank you so much.